Thank you. Well, how's everybody doing this morning? It's early. Well, guys, you have an opportunity this morning to have a phenomenal speaker come to you. He comes from the other side of the world, Germany. Who here has gone on the 8th grade trip to Washington, D.C.? By a show of hands. 5 of you. Wow. Okay, so we are the people that bring you guys to Washington, D.C., and we believe that it's not just a trip to Washington, D.C. We want to impact your lives to be world changers. If you've gone on the trip, you'll remember that. Your speaker today comes from communism, Germany, Berlin, Germany. We partnered with his ministry. He grew up behind the Berlin Wall. Who here has heard of the Berlin Wall? Oh, wow. Good job. He'll speak more on that. He'll give kind of a short synopsis of his life and how Jesus impacted his life. But guys, if you could put your hands together for Michael Furchert.
Guten Morgen. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. How are you? So great to be here with you. I've been looking forward to come and visit and to share with you. This morning I have 45 minutes to take you on a journey back in time and to the other side of the world, into a country where we did not enjoy the freedoms and liberties that you have here in the United States of America. I want to take you back in time to the other side of the world. Let's go 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90 years back in time and over the ocean to Germany. It is the year 1939 right now. Adolf Hitler is ruling Nazi Germany. He is the greatest madman, the greatest bully the world has ever seen. He will start World War II, kill millions of people. He will gas 6 million Jews in the Holocaust. And he is the boss of my grandfather. Because he's in charge of the public education system, and my grandfather is a public school teacher under Adolf Hitler in Nazi Germany. But he's also a confessing Christian, and that poses a conflict. And it does not take long, and the Nazis march into his house, and they urge him to take down the painting of Jesus Christ that he kept of his private study desk at home, join the Nazi party, be one of them, conform to their beliefs, teach their doctrines in school, turn away from this faith in this Jesus Christ. My grandfather had to make a choice. At this time, he was the only public school teacher in his school and in his entire city that was still refusing to join the Nazi party, and the pressure against him was growing ever stronger. If he would join in, if he would be one of them, he could hold on to his good position and the respect and the privileges that came with it, and the income and the safety for his family. Or he could take a stand for his faith in Jesus Christ and maybe lose everything. My grandfather knew if he would stand up to the Nazis of Hitler Germany, there would be consequences. But he also knew that there could only be one God in his life. And so he prayed to God for courage, and then he stood up to the Nazis and he declared, this painting remains, and he refused to take it down. And he refused to join the Nazi party, to be one of them, to conform to their beliefs, or turn away from his faith in Jesus Christ. Of course, the Nazis were angered by his resistance. And so he was let go from being a public school teacher, and he was sent into the battlefields of World War II. An easy way to get rid of him and his inconvenient voice, because he refused to conform. And yet, throughout the war, he experienced miracles of God's love and faithfulness. Over and over, his life was spared. In the one situation, the enemy saved his life. In another situation, he was pulled in the last moment from execution while everybody else was shot. After 6 years of war, my grandfather returned home alive, proclaiming as he did before, I know that my Redeemer lives. When Nazi Germany and Adolf Hitler's empire was defeated and was in ruins and ashes and rubble, my grandparents and their family still stood on the same firm foundation that they had built their lives on, their faith in Jesus Christ, their trust into a kingdom that could not be shattered nor destroyed, the kingdom of God. My grandparents never grew tired of following Jesus Christ despite the difficulties and the persecution. No, they knew that their Bible didn't speak about easy and comfortable Christianity. It spoke about picking up your cross, denying yourself and following your Lord and Savior in good and in difficult times. But they also knew what Jesus had done for us when he gave his life on the cross for our salvation. And they never wanted to turn away from God's love and faithfulness, even if they had to go against the odds. And the stories of my grandparents, especially the stories of Grandpa, they inspired me when I was a kid. I wanted to be like him. I wanted to take a stand for my faith. And my biggest dream when I was growing up, my biggest dream was not that one day I would be rich and famous and have a big house, a nice career, a fast car. No, my dream growing up was I wanted to see my grandparents. I wanted to be able to listen to the stories of my grandpa right there in his apartment. I wanted to eat the cookings of my grandmother and listen to devotions and Bible readings. And I wanted to see the painting of Jesus Christ over the study desk of my grandfather, the painting that heard so many stories about that he had never taken down. But I knew that that dream would probably never come true. Not because my grandparents had already passed away. No, they were still alive. Not because they lived so far away, like on the other side of the world, that I would never be able to visit them. No, they lived on the other side of the city. The other side of Berlin. But the reality of my life as I was growing up was the Berlin Wall. A 12 feet tall, 100 miles long concrete barrier with barbed wire, electric fences, armed soldiers on high security towers to guard it day and night, hidden landmines in the ground to make any escape into freedom impossible. The Berlin Wall had been set up overnight, and overnight it separated our country, our capital city of Berlin, and many of our families, including our own family. My grandparents now lived on the free side of the Berlin Wall. We lived behind the Berlin Wall, deprived of freedom and liberty. So how did this Berlin Wall come about? And what was that big wall anyway? Well, I talked about World War II. Adolf Hitler trying to conquer the world. Did they win? Did the Nazis win? No, they didn't. Because the Allies came and liberated Nazi Germany. And the Allies were the Russians, the Americans, the French, and the British. And the Russians, they came from the east, and the Americans, the French, and the British, they came from the west, and they liberated Nazi Germany, and then they divided Germany amongst each other. And the Russians, they took the eastern part of Germany. The Americans, the British, and the French, they took the western part of Germany. And the Russians, they were communists and atheists. They didn't believe in freedom and liberty, so they established communism in the eastern part of Germany. And the Americans, the French, and the British, they believed in freedom and liberty and established democracy in the western part of Germany. If you had a choice, where would you want to live? Under a communist dictatorship that takes away your freedoms and your liberties, that teaches you there is no God? Or in the West, under freedom and liberty? Well, many East German people started leaving. They didn't want to live under communism. They started leaving in the West. And the communist leaders said, what do we do? Our people are running away. What do we do to keep them? Maybe we should tell them how great socialism and communism is. Maybe they will stay. Maybe we can persuade them. But no, they kept leaving. What do we do? What do we do to keep them from leaving into the free West? Let us build a wall. And overnight they built this wall with barbed wire and electric fences and armed soldiers on high security towers and hidden landmines in the ground. And now the East German people were imprisoned. Overnight, as they woke up in the morning, there was this big wall dividing Germany now into communist East Germany and free West Germany, dividing our capital city of Berlin into communist East Berlin and free West Berlin, and dividing many of our German families, including our own family. And as I said, my grandparents now lived on the other side of the Berlin Wall in freedom. My parents, brothers, sisters, aunts, and uncles, we were stuck behind the Berlin Wall under a communist dictatorship that deprived us of freedom and liberty, imprisoned. And life behind the Berlin Wall was very simple, very humble. We were not starving like people in the third world, but we didn't have all the abundance that you have here in America and the Western world. I remember, for example, we would get a shipment of fruits like oranges or bananas maybe once, twice, or 3 times a year. So we had a special deal in our town. Whenever a shipment of bananas comes in, you run around, you ring the doorbell of your friends and neighbors, and you tell them that they have bananas in the store so that they would not miss that shipment. Did you ever do this? You're running around, ringing the doorbells of your friends and neighbors and shouting, they have bananas in the supermarket. You should try this one day. You should do this. Just to see what they would say. Maybe they would look at you, so what's your problem? Get some sleep, dude. But I remember when I was growing up and somebody would ring our doorbell and shout, "They have bananas in the store." And I would stop everything I was doing, grab my money, run to the store as fast as I could to be there at time for the one banana for every family member distribution. So we were 7 in our family, so we got 7 bananas, once or twice or maybe 3 times a year. And now I tour the United States of America and I see your huge grocery stores and supermarkets and malls and mega malls and Walmarts and super Walmarts. And sometimes I get panicked, I get lost, I don't find my way back out. And if I finally do find my way back out, I realize, oops, I didn't buy anything. Because I was so overwhelmed by all the choices, and the one thing I really needed I couldn't find in the abundance of so many things. And then I remember how I stood in our little grocery stores behind the Berlin Wall. They had a few kinds of cheese, a few kinds of meat, a few kinds of whatever, if it wasn't sold out. Over here in your huge grocery stores and supermarkets and malls and mega malls and Walmarts and super Walmarts, I just look at the cheese section 1 mile long. With all kind of cheese and all kind of brand names, all kind of wrappings, all kind of tastes, all kind of sizes, all kinds of prices. I look at the meat section 1 mile long. I realized you guys even have half a mile of a dog food section with more choices for your beloved pets than we had food to eat in communist East Germany. And if it was so difficult for us to get a banana, imagine how difficult it must have been to get a car. Now, we could not just go to one of those many car dealership places that you have here in America. If you have the money, you go there, buy a car, drive home pretty quick. We couldn't do that. We had to fill in application documents. We had to apply with the East German government to get a car. And then we had to wait for approval to finally take our turn and purchase this car. Now, have a guess how long we had to wait. 3 years? That would be long. 2 years? Okay, I'm going to give you a hint. It starts with the number 15. But 15 what? 15 minutes until the paperwork was done? No. 15 hours for them to bring the car out of the garage? No. 15 days to wait for the car to be shipped into town? No. 15 weeks to wait for the car to be shipped in from a different state? No. 15 months to wait for the car to be built? No. We had to wait 15 years. The waiting list for telephone was 10 years. The waiting list for a car was 15 years. And you probably think if you have to wait 15 years for a car, that better be a really special, good-looking, fancy car with all kind of extras and comfort and luxury that took so long to manufacture it. Nope, it wasn't. It was a very simple, humble car. It had 2 doors, 4 tires, 1 steering wheel, and that was about it. I'm not kidding you. The East German Trabant was so simple it did not even have a gas gauge. So you never really knew how much gas you had left. And I have vivid memories of our family pushing the Trabant back home because we had run out of gas. And now that I tour the United States of America and I come into a new town or bigger city, I often see, wow, they have one car dealership place right next to the other, right next to the other, right next to the other. Sometimes I gain the impression they're selling more cars here than they have people living in town. And not just simple cars, no. What you have over here in America, you know what I call this? Moving living rooms. With carpet and CD player and air conditioner, electric windows going up and down, nying, nying, on the other side, nying, nying. And then you have something to pull out to put in your Coke and your hamburger, and some have a television and a radio navigation system. I realized you can live all your life in a car in America. You don't even have to leave it. You have everything you need right there, and then when you get hungry, what do? Right? Burger King drive-thru, McDonald's drive-thru, Subway drive-thru. When you have to take care of business, need some money, what do? Yeah, bank drive-thru, ATM drive-thru. We have almost pretty much a drive-thru for everything in America. And I'm just waiting for the day they open the first dentist drive-thru. You just stick your head out of the window, and then they come with a drill and drill you up. Just make sure you don't press a button for the electric window to go up right in that moment. Or your head would be stuck. Well, you see, growing up behind the Berlin Wall was very different than living in a country of freedom and liberty and all the abundance you have here. And sometimes it's all right to poke fun at those cultural differences. But the biggest difference for me, and that is why I'm here today, the biggest difference for me was to grow up under a totalitarian communist regime that deprived us of freedom and liberty and that taught us that there is no God. There was no room in communist beliefs for God. God did not exist, and he was needed. Without God and without sun, we will get the harvest done. That was a slogan taught to the farmers in our community. Imagine that arrogance. Without God and without sun, we will get the harvest done. We need no king, no emperor, no God to save us. To redeem us from our misery, we must arise ourselves. That was a song students had to sing in my school. We cursed the God we used to pray to. That was part of a poem students had to recite in front of their teachers in my school. But at the same time, I grew up in a Christian family. My father was a pastor, my mother a Sunday school teacher. They taught me and my brothers and sisters that there is a God, and that God has loved us so much that he has sent his son, Jesus Christ, into this world to die for us on the cross, to save us from sin, to grant us salvation and everlasting life. And every morning before going to school, our parents prayed for us that God would give us the strength to defend our faith in Jesus Christ in an atheist society and socialist education system that rejected God. My father had actually not always been a pastor. As a matter of fact, he had been a financial economist working for the communist government. But he had also been a Christian, and that posed a conflict. One day he came to work with a crosspin on his suit jacket. Immediately he was confronted by the communist officials. You have to take off that crosspin from your suit jacket. The public workplace is not the right place for you to confess your personal beliefs. And my father, knowing that the Bible teaches us to be ready and prepared to give a reason for the hope we have at all times, but to do so with love and respect, he said to his superiors, okay, if that is your policy, that we cannot confess our personal beliefs in the public workplace, I will respect that. And I will take off the crosspin from my suit jacket. As soon as you and all your colleagues take off the Communist Party pin. Whoa. They came to work every morning confessing their beliefs in communism and its atheist philosophy that the God does not exist. Not one of them took off the Communist Party pin. Next morning, my father came back to work still wearing the cross pin on his suit jacket. So he was called into the office of the boss. Herr Furchert, please take a seat. The position of bank director has become available, and we really would like to offer it to you. You have all the degrees, all the qualifications, all the experience. Think about the income you can make and the respect and privileges that come with that position. The income and safety you can offer to your family. You have all the experience, all the degrees, all the qualifications. There's only one thing that is missing. What would that be? Take off that crosspin from your suit jacket. Join the Communist Party. Put on the Communist Party pin. Be one of us, and we will make you bank director. My father had to make a choice. He could join in, be one of them, hold on to his good position, even get a better one. The respect and privileges that came with it, the income and the safety for his family. Or he could take a stand for his faith in Jesus Christ and maybe lose everything. My father came back to work the next morning and he said, I so much appreciate the offer and I really would like to accept, but if it requires of me to compromise my faith in God or even walk away from it, I cannot do this. Thanks, but no thanks. Not only did my dad lose his promotion to become bank director now he was let go altogether. He was fired. They told him that his hostile philosophies were poisoning the work atmosphere. That is what they called the Christian faith. Hostile philosophies that were poisoning the work atmosphere. And my dad was gone. And the communists believed that they had silenced another Christian voice. But his voice was just about to be heard because he wouldn't be silent about his faith. He wouldn't give in. He wouldn't let his head hang down in defeat. He wouldn't be intimidated. No, instead, he became a pastor, a preacher. And he proclaimed the gospel of Jesus Christ and the message of salvation even more boldly behind the Berlin Wall of Communist East Germany. And so I grew up as a PK, a preacher's kid, in a pastor's family behind the Berlin Wall. where at a very young age I realized I too would have to make choices. Like my father, my grandfather before me, I too would have to make choices. And I would have to make those choices at a very young age, when being 7 years old. Because behind the Berlin Wall, when you came to school, all your rights and privileges, your acceptance, your respect, it all came through memberships of communist youth organizations. And if you didn't join in, you stood alone, mocked, ridiculed like an outcast, made fun of or bullied. Started right there, first grade, the organization of young pioneers. If you would join in, you would gain respect and recognition and friends, and you could take part in many activities in school and many school events and class trips and field trips. You would get a special Young Pioneers uniform to wear on special occasions. But the main purpose of this organization was to teach young students to follow in total obedience their communist leaders, including the atheist worldview that a God does not exist. And I had to make a choice. Did I want to be a young pioneer as well? Did I want to gain respect and recognition and make friends like everybody else? Did I want to be able to join the events and activities in school and take part in their class trips and field trips? Did I want to have this Young Pioneers uniform that everybody else would wear on special occasions like during flag raising ceremony in the morning? Or did I want to go alone against the odds, even if I would maybe be the only one in my class believing that there is a God? I was 7 years old when I stood up in school refusing to join the organization of young communist pioneers because I knew that there was a God and I'd started to believe in him. But I also knew that I was about to start a life where Jesus Christ would maybe be the only friend I had. Imagine when there was flag raising ceremony in the morning and all the classes had to line up in front of the school in almost military order and salute the communist flag. Everybody could see that I was the only boy in school not wearing the uniform of the Young Pioneers and not saluting the communist flag. There were two more students, two girls, that didn't wear that uniform, that didn't salute the flag. They happened to be my sisters. We were the only 3 students in the entire school that had refused to join the communist youth organizations and taking a stand for our faith in Jesus Christ instead. Back then I didn't know it. Today I know it from research, that we were among 2% of East German students that would not join the communist youth organizations. 98% of students had joined in, conformed, and gone with the crowd. So that was a very lonesome stand for us. And we could not just blend in a crowd of many other believers and stay anonymous. No. Once we had made that choice, we had to live up to it on a daily basis, and we had to make choices on a daily basis. And time this morning is way too short to talk about all the choices we had to make, but I can mention a few. Let me fast forward a little bit. When I became a teenager, like your age, there was a very special celebration approaching. It was called the Youth Consecration. The Youth Consecration was the biggest celebration ever in the life of a teenager in communist East Germany. Because on this very day, public ceremony, they became adult people with respect and recognition, the rights and the status of being an adult person, a member of a society. And everybody was looking forward to this event. Everybody wanted to become an adult person. Nobody wanted to remain a child for the rest of their lives. But as part of the ceremony, public ceremony, every student had to pledge allegiance to communism, surrender their lives to communism, and dedicate the future of their lives to fight for communism and the atheist worldview that a God does not exist. And I had to make a choice. I wanted to become an adult person too. I did not want to be the only one who would remain a child in the eyes of my classmates. How much more fun would they make of me? How much more mocking and ridicule to go through after all the disadvantages and sacrifices already if I now would also be the only child in their eyes? But on the other hand, I did not want to compromise my faith in Jesus Christ either. And I had to ask myself, how adult and how mature and how grown up would I really be if I didn't have the courage to take a stand for my faith? And wasn't it more important to be regarded an adult, a grown-up, a mature, responsible person in God's kingdom and gain God's approval, rather than striving to gain the approval of men and my peers and my classmates and the world and the society around me? When the day of youth consecration came, everybody went, and I stayed at home, behind the window watching, because our house was right next to the town square. And I could see how my classmates arrived with their families and relatives, and they got out of their cars. The girls were wearing the most beautiful dresses and flowers in their hands. The boys were wearing their most elegant suits and ties. And they walked across the town square to the town's hall to have the youth consecration public ceremony. They would become adult people now with respect and recognition, members of a society. The biggest day in their life. And I stayed at home watching, maybe some tears running down my cheek, because part of me wanted to join in and belong to them. Be part of the crowd and have friends. The other part of me realized that I couldn't follow God and the Word at the same time. I couldn't walk the fence. I had to make a choice. When I came back to school the next morning, well, you can imagine, I was in for even more mocking and ridicule. They all were adult people now. But the stupid Christian will remain a child for the rest of his life for his crazy belief in some imaginary God that everybody knows does not exist anyway. Well, I could not become an adult person in the eyes of my classmates and the society around me, but nobody could stop me from becoming 16. And when you're 16, you can get what? There you go, your driver's license. Yes, when you're 16, you can get your driver's license. And I happened to be the oldest one in class. That meant I would be the first one turning 16. I would be the first one getting the driver's license. And I would be the first one riding on a moped or later a motorcycle or later driving a car. Wow, what a chance to finally gain some respect and recognition. They could not consider me a child anymore if I'd be the first one with a driver's license. Maybe they would start to respect me now. Maybe they would even admire me a little. Maybe they would even come to me and ask me if I could take them for a ride. I was so excited, I was so thrilled, I could hardly wait for the day of turning 16 and being the first one with a driver's license. And little did I know that once again I had to make a choice between my faith in Jesus Christ and the privilege of getting this driver's license. They didn't do this to everyone, but they did it to me because I wouldn't conform. 3 times. My school had promised me that I would not have to join any communist organization to get the driver's license. 3 times. I went through all the driver's classes, paid all the money, passed all the exams. At the end of each driver's course, there was a driver's license on the table, and then there was a document of membership in a communist organization right next to it. Just one signature, and I could have it. I wanted to get this driver's license so badly. That was my chance now to gain a little respect and recognition, but also that was my chance to have a driver's license. But it required a compromise. Compromising my faith in God for my advantages, more enjoyable life, respect and recognition. And I knew that God was not a God of compromise. When Jesus Christ gave his life on the cross, he gave it fully, totally, and completely, and not just a little. And when he asks us to return our love and faithfulness to him, he asks us to do so fully, totally, and completely, not just a little. There was nothing wrong with getting this driver's license, but there was something wrong with selling out my faith for my own privileges and advantages. I just couldn't sign this document. I couldn't commit myself to the atheist worldview that a God does not exist. I just couldn't. I never signed that document. And as a consequence, I never got the driver's license. So for the rest of communist history behind the Berlin Wall, I wasn't the first one riding a moped or motorcycle or driving a car, gaining the respect and recognition of my classmates. No, I was the last one riding my rattling bike to school every day, listening to the laughter and ridicule of my classmates who called me a fool for the decision I'd made, giving up my driver's license for my crazy belief in some imaginary God. But you know, deep inside my heart, I knew that actually I had more than they had. I knew that my life was not built on a foundation of sand and false promises that would come crumbling down one day. And I also knew, and I want you to hear this, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, I also knew that my self-respect, my self-worth, my self-dignity, who I was, did not depend on the respect and recognition and approval of my classmates or the world and society around me.
It depended on knowing who I was in the eyes of God, that He loved me, that I was created unique with a plan and purpose for my life. Towards the end of school time, I had to choose between my faith in Christ and the privilege of taking part in my graduation ceremony, taking part in our seniors trip, or having a college education. And refusing to join the organizations and turning away from my faith, I couldn't take part in our graduation ceremony. I couldn't take part in our seniors trip. I couldn't have a college education. As a matter of fact, when my class went on their 1-week seniors trip, 1 week of sightseeing, traveling around, enjoying a great time, I was put on a construction site to carry stones and clean up the trash for this 1 week instead. But in moments like this, when there were tough choices I had to make and when there were tough consequences, all I wanted to do was what I'd seen my parents and grandparents do before me throughout turbulent times of German history. I wanted to look up to Jesus Christ. And I wanted to remember what He had gone through for me. How He was mocked and ridiculed for me. How He was beaten and spit at for me. How they pierced thorns into His head and nailed Him to the cross to die for me and my salvation. And He had remained strong. He had remained faithful. He didn't compromise. He didn't go halfway. He wasn't lukewarm or wishy-washy. He gave His very life so I could live. But I also knew that Jesus had risen. That He wasn't just a great teacher, a great role model, a great philosopher, who, yes, He changed His word at that time, and then He died and remained dead in the grave like many teachers, role models, and philosophers before and after Him. No. Jesus had risen. He was alive. He was the Son of God. He was our living Lord and Savior, and He would give us the strength to follow Him in good times and in difficult times, even if we had to go against the odds. But the one thing I did not know was that I would actually see the day come true, that communism would crumble, that the Berlin Wall would come down, that we would gain freedom and liberty. And I remember how it started, and I remember where it started. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, do you have any idea the peaceful revolution that would bring down the Berlin Wall and change history? Do you know where this started? Any ideas? It seems like a well-kept secret in America, but it shouldn't. You should know about it and you should tell your friends about it. This peaceful revolution started as a movement of faith and prayer in the East German churches. I remember because I was there. As the people came together for worship services, for prayer services, for candle vigils, praying to God to bring us freedom. And out of the churches, the people marched into the streets with burning candles in their hands, singing songs of praise and freedom and Christian worship songs in the streets, approaching the armed soldiers and the communist military that was armed and lining up in the churches, lining up around the churches and in the streets, armed and waiting for orders to shoot. My brother-in-law had just been drafted into the military, and he called us on the phone and his voice was trembling, and he said, the military has just been put on high alert, and they have ordered the tanks and the troops to move out to Berlin to bring down the peaceful revolution and the prayer marches in the streets. And my brother-in-law was terrified because he knew that as a soldier, he would be sent out to Berlin as well. And he knew it was his people, his family, his relatives, his aunts and uncles, his cousins out there in the streets praying for freedom. And we all knew what had happened in communist China just a few months prior. Student demonstrations for freedom that were brought down when the Chinese military responded by bringing out the tanks and the army and opening fire, and several thousand students were killed. And we knew they could do the same to us in East Germany. And our East German government, rather than condemning what had happened in China, our East German government publicly praised the massacre on China's Tiananmen Square as a way of how you deal with those who oppose communism. And they were preparing for the same military solution to bring down our peaceful protests in the street. And there we stood with burning candles, faith and prayer, versus a military dictatorship armed with guns, tanks, and cruise missiles. We didn't have a prayer. But wait, maybe that is all we had. We had a prayer. And there was this lady, she was kneeling on the street praying. She was surrounded by armed soldiers, military and police. And then she rose up and she took a flower and she put it into the muzzle of a soldier's gun. And the soldier stood there, the gun pointed at her. And then he started crying, tears running down his cheek. Because maybe deep inside his heart, he had been longing for freedom and liberty himself, rather than being an instrument of oppression and injustice. It remains a historic miracle, and you can research it. Not one shot was fired. The order to open fire was never given. Instead, our communist government crumbled under the pressure of our peaceful prayer movements. The Berlin Wall came down. We gained freedom and liberty. I was 17 years old. My sisters 19 and 14. My brothers 8 and 4 years old. When together with our parents, we stepped over the rubble of the Berlin Wall into freedom. And we look back and we ask ourselves, so what was finally stronger in the end? Was it Adolf Hitler and Nazi Germany trying to rule and conquer the world? No, Nazi Germany was defeated, had ended in ruins, rubble and ashes. Was it the communist empire that wanted to rule and conquer the world? No, our communist regime had just collapsed under the pressure of our peaceful prayer movement. Was it the Berlin Wall that kept us imprisoned? No. The Berlin Wall had just come down, was now sold in little pieces in souvenir stores. But the one thing that had remained and outlasted all of it was our faith in Jesus Christ. It had grown stronger with every day. It had outlasted totalitarian regimes that had come and gone. It had outlasted man-made empires and kingdoms and rulers that had come and gone. It had taught us why it is so important to build our lives on a firm foundation and to put our trust and faith into a kingdom that cannot be destroyed. Well, maybe you're here today and you might think, well, you're a Christian, so you're partial. You want to see God's hand in the fall of the Berlin Wall. Maybe you're here today and you're wondering if this God is even real. Maybe you're here today with doubts in your heart. Maybe you're even here today and you know that deep inside your heart you're actually an atheist and you cannot believe that there is a God. You know what? It's all right. Don't take my words for it. Listen to the voice of one of our communist officials, one of our leading politicians, a staunch atheist who spent his life teaching that there is no God. He later said about their defeat and the victory of the peaceful revolution, he said, quote, "Our government and our military was prepared for everything, but not for burning candles and not for faith and prayer." Our government and our military was prepared for everything, but not for burning candles and not for faith and prayer. Against that, they had no weapon. To this very day, communist China blames Christianity for the fall of communism in Eastern Europe because their leaders have understood that the power of faith and prayer, the gospel of Jesus Christ, can impact lives, change hearts, transform societies, and even change history. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, how much more could we do in this country of freedom and liberty if we realized and knew that the power of faith and prayer, the gospel of Jesus Christ, indeed can impact hearts, change lives, transform societies, and even change history? This is why I'm here today to challenge you not to take your freedoms for granted, not to allow freedom to let your faith go superficial and light, but to use the priceless privilege of freedom that you have in this country to follow Jesus Christ with a deeper commitment, with more love and faithfulness, and to take a stand for Jesus as he had taken a stand for you. The day the Berlin Wall came down, the day we gained freedom and liberty, was also the day that we could be reunited as one family. Now my dream became true. I could visit my grandparents on the other side of the wall. I could listen to my grandfather's life stories firsthand right in his apartment. I could eat grandmother's cooking and listen to her devotions and Bible readings, but most of all, I could see the painting of Jesus Christ over the study desk of my grandfather, the painting that heard so many stories about that he had never taken down, no matter the cost or the consequences. My grandpa had grown old by now, and he gathered us around him and he said to his family, "I am so grateful to God that I could live long enough to see the day come true that communism would crumble, that the Berlin Wall would come down, that you would gain freedom and liberty in East Germany, and that we can be one family again. But I'm an old man by now, and I don't know how much longer the Lord has given me to live. Therefore tell me already now the things you would like to inherit. Most of it you can take with you right away. I don't need many things for life anymore. And as I walked through his apartment, there was one thing that most of all captured my interest and my attention. And I said to him, Grandpa, I really would like to have. What do you think? I really would like to have this painting over your study desk. And Grandpa looked at me with a gentle smile and he said to me, Michael, this painting has been with me all my life, and I've never taken it down. Not when the Nazis demanded so, not when later the communists demanded so. In my life, I always wanted to follow God first. It wasn't always easy. At times there was a cost to consider and a price to pay. At times there was discrimination and persecution if you wanted to follow Jesus Christ. But God has always been faithful. I've never taken down this painting all my life, he said, and I don't want to take it down now either. I want this painting to remain over my study desk until the last day of my life. But once the Lord has called me home, it shall be passed on to you as my legacy, as a family legacy. A few years later, Grandpa died. And the painting of Jesus Christ, it now hangs over my study desk. And I've promised to God I shall never take it down. And I pray that I will not be like Simon Peter in the Bible, making big promises. Now, Jesus, I will fight for you. And then when difficult times come, walk away and deny his name. But you know, here's the good news. We do not have to stand on our own strength. My grandfather didn't stand up to the Nazis because he was such a strong man. No, only because he could hold on to the hand of a strong and powerful God. My father didn't stand up to the communists because he was such a strong man. No, only because he could hold on to the hand of a strong and a powerful God. And I myself, as a child and a teenager behind the Berlin Wall, I didn't make the choices I did and accept the sacrifices and disadvantages I did because I was such a tough, strong kid. No, in the opposite. In the midst of my weaknesses, in the midst of my hurt and pain, in the midst of my fear and anxiety, I knew I too could hold on to the hands of a strong and powerful God and let my Lord and Savior carry me. This painting that now hangs over my study desk is a daily reminder to me of the choices we have to make in life. And the story I shared with you this morning is not just my story. It's not just my family's story. It's not just my nation's story. This is your story as well. Because you too have to make choices even in this country of freedom and liberty. They might just look different, but in the end, they are the very same choices. You too have to ask yourselves, will I follow God or will I follow the world? Will I take a stand for my faith or will I give in to indifference, complacency, and compromise? Will I be a disciple of Jesus Christ and love him and follow him and serve him, or will I be lukewarm and wishy-washy? But here's the good news, the same God that sustained generations of my family under dictatorships, that brought us freedom, that brought down the Berlin Wall, is the same God today and the same God in your country. And if you want to follow him, he will give you the strength to do so in good times and in difficult times. The painting that hangs over my study desk, it shows the Great Commission. Matthew 28. Jesus sending his disciples into all the world to proclaim the good news that there is a God, that he has loved us so much, that he has sent his Son Jesus Christ into this world to die for us on the cross, to save us from sin, to grant us salvation and everlasting life, and to grant us a freedom that is much greater than any worldly freedom and any worldly promise this world could offer. And with this, thank you so much for your attention. May God bless you, and may He grant you the courage to take a stand for Him as He has stood up for you. Thank you so much. God bless you.